Nepal, 2025. The streets are filled with violence as young people protest against a government accused of decades of corruption. It's one of many similar protests sweeping the globe. And these protesters might be separated by thousands of miles, but they share a common DNA. They are young, they are digitally connected, and they are angry.
Even if you do get a job, what is your life going to be? What prospects are there for you, really?
In 2025 alone, we have seen major youth-led uprisings unseat politicians in Nepal, Peru, and Madagascar. We are witnessing a global wave of protests spearheaded by the so-called Gen Z. But why now? And what's different about these protests compared to past ones? And have they worked?
From Madagascar to Nepal to Peru. Gen Z protests erupting in pockets around the globe in recent months. Though the individual causes vary, they share a common thread. Protesters in their teens and 20s angry at the state of their country.
There's been a flurry of so-called Gen Z protests in the last 18 months.
This current phase started in Bangladesh last year when explicitly young people use this Gen Z uprising term to distinguish between their way of doing politics and the older generation's way of doing politics, which they were rejecting.
Things are very difficult for young people from across the social economic classes and across the world.
I think it's important to keep in mind that protests almost always are young people.
In each country, there have been different triggers for the protests. In Mexico, it was the killing of a local mayor. In Peru, it was the announcement of pension reforms. And in Madagascar, it was shortages of water and electricity.
So it's a bit like lighting a fire. All the tinder is there, right? The tinder is there in terms of the economic conditions, in terms of the disillusionment with government, in terms of widespread perceptions of corruption, and then there's a spark.
But at the core is a deep sense of dissatisfaction with visions of the future. And countries with a large youth population and high unemployment provide the perfect conditions for frustrations to boil over.
Even if you do get a job, what is your life going to be? What prospects are there for you, really? And I suppose that's affecting young people all over the world.
This generation is often better educated than their parents, yet they find themselves locked out of the economy.
Governments are less and less able to deliver the kinds of goods and services that people need, including stable economies, prices that people can afford, an expectation of getting better off.
And seismic societal shifts like COVID and the advent of AI have contributed to a sense of uncertainty and hopelessness about the future.
Younger generations are promised that their future will be better than the generation before them and that we have a better future. And the promises have not been fulfilled.
People are feeling increasingly dissatisfied with democracy. Corruption is also a big issue connecting those two. People believe their economies are bad because the political and economic elites are in collusion in some way.
That means a feeling of distrust, mistrust. They've gone from being anxious to being frustrated to being angry.
Social media has been crucial in galvanizing large groups of young people for a cause.
The use of digital means to organise and to spread messages, a lot of which escapes old people, escapes governments, and in particular can escape authoritarian governments that are clamping down on free speech. So this creates a really important space where younger people can discuss, organise their activities. I think that's the Gen Z element of it.
Popping up in protests around the world, a form of the Jolly Roger flag, now a symbol of Gen Z defiance.
In protest movements, symbols act as a unifying image that instantly communicates solidarity to participants and the core message to the rest of the world. Since the protests in Indonesia, a flag of a grinning skull and crossbones wearing a straw hat has been flown. It's derived from the Japanese manga and anime series One Piece, and it represents a group of characters who challenge authority. The use of the flag quickly spread. But what else binds these protests together?
They have one thing in common, which is they are leaderless.
Gen Z protesters value the lack of hierarchical structure in an effort to foster a sense of equality, sometimes lacking in their country's society. And the lack of a figurehead also keeps the movement safe.
A leaderless movement is high risk, high reward. It's high reward in that if there's no one to co-opt and no one to repress, then it's all or nothing. You either win or you fade away. It's very positive in highly repressive contexts because you don't know who to repress.
It's not that trade unions and political parties have not been supporting them, one side or another, But that's not who's driving them. They seem to be very much either leaderless or led by, novice politicians, young students or youth groups that haven't got a deep kind of root in national politics.
And the use of social media has not just been a tool to democratize the protests, but it has also helped inspire movements in other countries.
Which brings these feelings of community and collective belonging when individual people realise that they're not alone, and that brings a whole different range of emotions and feeling of empowerment against a system that is trying to stop them.
And thanks to social media, the speed at which protests can mobilise is terrifying for authoritarian regimes.
They're the first generation that's been able to organise protests within minutes.
The digitization of these protests have also increased the likelihood of accountability when it comes to violent repression.
It's very hard for the state to hide now when it starts shooting people. Somebody will always be there with their phone.
And to be able to spread evidence and abuse of the things that they're complaining about globally within seconds.
Viral moments of police brutality escalate the protests. And that's unique to Gen Z protests, because the instant impact of social media has never existed in this way before. But the power of social media is no match for the repressive tactics of some authoritarian regimes.
Morocco basically is ruled by an absolutist monarch, Mohammed VI, and he is the one who dictates on everything in Morocco. He is a godlike personage. Basically, the protesters know better than to make their protest against the real power in Morocco, because to do so would risk lengthy terms in prison. In Morocco, the prime minister is appointed by the king, of course, effectively. And it's up to the king, whether the prime minister resigns or not. Protesters were very upset and disappointed when, in his one annual appearance in front of the people, there was no sign that he was going to sack the prime minister.
So what makes for a successful protest? The repressive tactics from a country can have huge repercussions on the success of a protest movement. Tactics like shutting down the internet and mass arrests can dampen the momentum. So how do you know if it has worked?
You have to qualify what you mean by success. But in terms of the short-term aim of getting rid of the people there at the moment, there is a surprisingly high level of success, I would say.
Bangladesh's former Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, was removed from power and sentenced to death in absentia. And in Nepal, the Prime Minister was replaced by someone chosen by the protesters. But even this kind of success is debatable. Meaningful long-term change takes years.
I think there is there's a sort of missing generation in the middle which needs to come in and could actually maybe broker a more productive politics than we're getting at the moment.
These waves of unrest reveal a deep structural crack in global politics: the age gap.
Lowering of the voting age helps that, should do. Maybe a sell-by date on politicians would be good. It's just, they need to get out of the way.
Whether these movements succeed or fail in the short term, the pressure is building. The tinder, the inequality, corruption, and feeling of a broken future isn't going anywhere.
People have been rude about the youth for at least 2,000 years. They've always said, young people, they don't care about anything other than themselves and they don't read. That goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? And this is clearly an example where people are actually very concerned about social justice.
As I've always said, it shouldn't be on the shoulders of young people to bring about change.